Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for part 2 of the Monday Q&As. So let's get it done. First question. Do you think celebrities who cut down for movies, example Daniel Craig for 007, which I didn't see, I'm not familiar with him, Gerard Butler for 300, etc., experimented with weight-cutting drugs, do you think they use other drugs as well? I've told you guys this before. I should probably cover it again. The thing to remember, when people look at these celebrity physiques, these transformations from movies, people will say, well, that could have been done natural. And I always respond with, no, that could have been done by someone who's highly motivated to train, who training is part of their lifestyle, who has very good coaches and is very, very disciplined over a long period of time. Those things could be done drug-free. Just because something is obtainable natural doesn't mean that it is. Hollywood is generally full of people who aren't necessarily that big on training hard. They have other things going on in their life, other focuses, and drug use, recreational drug use is insanely rampant in Hollywood, and it has been since before any of us were probably born. It's been that way a really long time. So using some extra drugs to help make an extra $1 million on your physique in a movie is pretty commonplace, and it's logical and it makes sense that they would do that. Because a lot of these actors, they need to make these amazing transformations for movies. They have access to really good coaches and trainers, and those coaches and trainers are going to have access to the best drugs. And these people are wealthy. They can afford quality drugs that are going to have less risk of harm to them. They can afford a lot of pharmaceutical grade stuff. They can even afford prescriptions so that doctors can write them prescriptions so that they're not even breaking any laws if they want to get a bunch of anavar, growth hormone, or whatever. So it's going to be very common, and it's safe to assume that most of these quick transformations, even if they work really, really hard, are a result of that. Because when you see them put out this material, they always do these insanely high volumes of training. We know that those high volumes of training respond better with drugs. They put them on these really high calorie diets, oftentimes yet they lose a ton of fat. In the real world, they wouldn't be losing fat without drugs on these higher calorie diets, even if they started with less muscle. So you're seeing a massive recomposition effect from combination of ultra high energy turnover and training stimulus with generally high calorie diets that are very, very high protein combined with hefty amounts of anabolic drugs thrown in it. That combination is allowing them to just massively recomposition. That's oftentimes what we see, and they end up with physiques that are probably obtainable, natural, and not even probably, but really are. They really are. People can naturally look like that, but not in the time frames that they're doing it in, or the discipline levels that most actors have towards their training. Their life doesn't revolve around training for 3 years straight. So that's the difference. So yes, there's generally drugs involved. There are probably exceptions, but most of the time. All right, next question. Does intramuscular injection, such as certain shots by your doctor, induce hypertrophy in the muscle of the injection? It is tearing muscle fibers, so when the fibers grow back bigger and stronger. Okay, you need to lose this tearing fibers myth. What you're talking about is micro tearing of fibers from training. It will make them thicker. Just doing stuff and other types of tearing to tissue in your body causes scar tissue, and that's generally what you see. A lot of these bodybuilders and even quite a few guys on YouTube are carrying inches of scar tissue in their arms, not just a little bit. They're inches and inches of scar tissue from these intramuscular injections that builds up over time from the actual damage that it causes to the tissue, and it causes it to build scar tissue, not thicker muscle fibers and contractile proteins. It's just scar tissue, just like you would get from an incision or a cut or a gunshot or whatever. It's scar tissue. And that's what you're going to get from intramuscular injections in general. If your doctor is giving you a prescription for anything that's intramuscular and it's used over and over repeatedly in a same spot, yes, you're going to get an accumulation of scar tissue there. And it will make the muscle bigger, but it's not gaining muscle mass, you're just adding scar tissue. So the answer is yes and no. And it's not, don't think of the tearing thing like that as stimulating actual muscle growth. It's stimulating scar tissue growth. All right, next question. Is it unhealthy to eat more than 250 grams of fat a day plus carbs if I'm trying to bulk and I'm one of those guys that always stays in single digit body fat even on a bulk? First of all, I hate you. Okay, just kidding, but not really. If you're one of those guys who really struggles to bulk and you just stay naturally really, really lean due to your genetics, then by all means have at it. If you need the extra dietary fat, a very, very high fat diet to get the calories in that you need to grow, then go ahead and do so, because if you're not getting fat, it doesn't matter. For a lot of people, that is the issue though. is that the very high fat calorie surplus will tend to put a lot of body fat on them. So that varies from person to person, but that's the risk for most people. However, again, if you seem to be the exception to that rule because of your genetics and that's what you got to do, then it's probably a good tactic. I would say go for it. If it's working for you, then do it. All right, next question. Hey Jason, my friend is 70 kilograms and he stalled 3 times on 105 kilograms on squat for 5 reps and 80 kilograms bench for 5 reps. He's also doing the 5x5 novice program. Should he lower the sets and reps for just up his calories and reset again? Thanks. You're going to get more stalls. Like, your friend is getting close to the limits of the program. He's going to get more out of it, but he's getting, 20, 30 kilos away from pretty much the end of the program now. You're going to see more frequent stalls. What I'm going to recommend is, since he stalled 3 times, I don't recommend this for everyone. But because he stalled 3 times, go ahead and do a full 1-week deload. Reduce all your weights by 50%. So if you're doing 100 kilos for sets of 5, drop down to 50 kilos for sets of 5. Drop all the 5 down to 3 sets instead of 5 sets. So cut your volume back, cut your weights back. Do that for a week. Come back, reset, start over, increase the calories slightly. Bump the calories another 5 to 10% per day, and you will push past that stall the majority of the time. All right, next question. How do I keep my scapula retracted while doing dumbbell bench press? I lose it as soon as I hit the bench from the vertical position to the horizontal. The weights just kind of push me down into the bench so that I lose the tightness and my back flattens out. I've got tutorials on how to do these. You got to see me do these. All right, the issue you're having, your bar path is wrong. You're pushing the dumbbells. If your scapular coming apart on the dumbbell bench press, which you probably don't want to do, you're coming up to the head too much. What you need to do is get set further back with an arch. Start with them on your knees, kick them up, and start with them down here so that you can get tight and you never get loose at the top by starting with them high. So start with them on the knees and kick them to your chest as you lay back. Press them out to here so that you can keep the scapula back. You notice if you come up here, the scapula will come apart more. Keep it down low. Do them like this more so that you're at a decline with an arch and you're pressing them closer towards your feet, and that will keep your scapula together. It will keep more tension on your pecs, and that's what I'm assuming you're trying to do with the dumbbell bench press. So hopefully that sorts you out. All right, next question. Would someone who has weak after a year of training due to an ineffective methods find it harder to make linear progression if they decided to get on a proper program? Or can you make linear gains if you have a novice strength level, regardless of time spent lifting? Cheers. If you are well under novice strength levels, even if you've been training for a year and you go on a proper linear progression program, yes, your strength gains should be quite good. You'll make good progress. I've had tons of guys who piddled around for a year or two on unorganized split routines. I'm not saying all split routines are bad, but most of them that novices write themselves are terrible. Most of them you get out of magazines are terrible. So they'll piddle around on these. They don't get the strength or the results that they want. And then I've had a lot of people go on my program, which is a linear progression program, and just make fantastic strength gains off of it, even though they didn't consider themselves a novice because they had a year or two of training. So the answer is yes, absolutely. You'll find that you'll make gains pretty well if you go onto a proper program. All right, next question. How should calories be calculated for obese people since they have a higher fat percentage? Should their calorie and macros be lower since fat requires less energy to maintain than muscle? Just wondering, what do you think? Thank you for what you do. Fat does still increase your total energy turnover. Fat does have a metabolism that's just much lower per pound than muscle. And someone who's carrying an extra 100 pounds of body fat, every time they get up and stand or walk around or move, they're still carrying 100 pounds of weight. Think about it yourself. A lot of you lean guys, if you were to throw a 100-pound backpack on and go take a walk, tell me you're not working harder and burning more energy with 100 pounds of dead weight that has no metabolism added. Of course you're burning through a lot more calories. So their weight does need to be a factor. However, if you want to lower their calories more based on that calculation, feel free to do so, because someone who is morbidly obese can actually run a much larger calorie deficit and lose more body fat per day than someone who's leaner while still gaining muscle mass from their training. So they could actually go on fairly low calories as long as things like protein and things are sufficient, and they're doing proper resistance training. They'll gain muscle while stripping off several pounds per week sometimes. So even though in theory you should count the fat towards their total energy turnover to a large extent, particularly if they're active, you can still run them on much lower calories and still get the results. So don't be afraid to drop them down a few hundred calories lower than you might have done based upon their weight calculations, just because they can lose the fat faster even if their total energy turnover is pretty high. All right, next question and last question of the week. Thoughts on thyroid problems and not losing weight? That's bullshit. Have a client who is 300 pounds and not losing weight on 2,200 to 2,400 calories. Could this be thyroid issues? Let's break this down. If you have major thyroid problems, you will still lose weight based upon a calorie deficit at a perfect rate. What a thyroid issue means is that you burn less total calories. It's not like 500 or 1,000 less calories. Someone who has major thyroid problem probably burns a few hundred less calories per day. Put that in perspective. So you could go get this client's thyroid checked, but if you have a 300-pound client who is doing resistance training plus any cardio, and I mean if they go for a 30-minute walk every day and you got them lifting weights twice a week and they're not losing weight on 2,400 calories, they are lying to you. Even if they have a thyroid issue, that person should be losing scale weight. They are not tracking their calories correctly. They're doing secret eating, or they are just flat lying to you. And I've done, Google any of my videos on metabolic derangement. There's tons of research out there on this. They're lying. There's not anything with their metabolism. And even if there was, they would still be losing weight on those calories in that situation, even with a really slow thyroid. And if they do have a slow thyroid, then they probably need to be on meds, so they should go get it checked anyways and get on the medication, because that'll probably change it another 200 calories. You could bump their calories another 200 and they'll still lose weight. But that calorie intake for someone who you've got active, who's 300 pounds, there's no way they're not losing fat and weight. It just isn't possible. So something's wrong. They're lying to you. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it has been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time. But let me give you guys a bicep shot before I go. Mount Bicepius.